lovers, and welcome to the Liberty Mike podcast, broadcasting from an undisclosed location in the heart of Dixie. I am Michael, and I am here with Liberty Larry.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Pretty good.
So this is our last podcast of the Biden administration.
Oh, it is. Interesting. I did not consider that.
Yeah. The next one will be the 23rd or later.
Yeah. It'll be in a new age.
Mm-hmm, yeah, new age. That's right.
Yeah.
So David Lynch died.
Yeah. So I immediately got a notification on my phone, and I told the two people that were in the room with me at work today that David Lynch had died, and I got the exact response I expected to, which was
David Lynch?
Who is that?
Yeah.
And so I told them, but I immediately thought of you because I know you're a huge fan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he was a heavy smoker, so I haven't looked into the details of his death at this point, but it is disappointing. He's made some films that I really liked, and the original Twin Peaks series, I think actually Firefly has exceeded it on my list of the greatest television series of all time. I just can't get away from Firefly. It's just so much fun in so many ways. And it's shorter. That kind of actually helps.
That helps, yeah.
There's like 30 episodes of Twin Peaks, and there's only 14 or 15 episodes of Firefly.
Like that. It's a season, and a movie.
And it's a little more playful, although there's plenty of that like weird kind of just silly comedy in Twin Peaks too.
Oh yeah.
The Return, he didn't have Mark Frost to like temper him.
Yeah.
And it's like real David Lynch, super weird, artsy, highly symbolic, doesn't really tell you anything that's going on.
Yeah.
Which is part of the fun of his movies, I think. Actually, I saw an interview with him a long time ago, and they were asking him about how he doesn't resolve everything in his films.
Yeah. So there's no unwinding of everything.
Yeah. And he said, well, real life doesn't give you all the answers. Why should cinema?
Yeah. That's a very annoying answer. That's not what I come to cinema for.
Oh no, I like it because it gives you so much room as a spectator or as the audience or consumer or whatever to like place your own meaning on top of a lot of it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And like you get to kind of in your own mind write the rest of the story instead of having it. I guess a lot of people are lazy.
Yeah.
To me, that's fun.
Well, it depends on what you're going in for. Like, if you know you're going into a movie for that, I think that's great. But sometimes you want to just have it all laid out for you and not have to
think.
Not do a lot of thinking on my own.
Well,
so, there's space for both.
If you don't want to think, David Lynch is not your guy.
Yeah,
that's certainly
it's not a lazy
true.
watch.
But I highly recommend people go. I think probably the most accessible film that he has is, oh gosh, now I can't think of the name of it. Blue Velvet.
Ah, yeah.
Blue Velvet. And it's a great film. It's got like a really great villain. Dennis Hopper plays the villain in it. And it's Dennis Hopper's always great. And it's a character.
Yeah.
And it's just a really good film. It's a really good film, and it's a fun film. And I say it's fun. It's fun for me. It's a little dark and kind of weird, and
it's fun if you like to think.
Yeah, but there's a lot going on in it, and there's a lot of symbolism. He's got this thing about traffic lights and food that just appear over and over again in a lot of his work, and I don't know. I think it's really good stuff, but there's like Wild at Heart, which is an early Nicolas Cage film.
Oh, okay.
He did Eraserhead and The Elephant Man. He did the original Dune movie.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Lost Highway, and like, oh gosh, there's so many. Yeah. It's really good stuff. I think I enjoy his films thoroughly. And Twin Peaks was something that I just got totally obsessed with
Yeah.
when I was in college, and spent a lot of time with friends. This was the only thing that we did consistently in my entire college life, my original college life, is that every day at 6:30 there was a group of people that would show up at my room to watch an episode of Twin Peaks.
Oh, yeah.
And we probably went through the entire series like 4 times.
Really?
And there were people that people were dedicated, man. People showed up for that.
Yeah, yeah.
We had like half a dozen people that would show up every day 6:30 to watch an episode of Twin Peaks.
And then talk about it.
And then talk about it.
Yeah.
It was fun. So it's too bad.
Yeah.
He was a real artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I liked his stuff. Yeah. And there's not a lot like him.
Yeah.
So I showed you and your wife that series, Brand New Cherry Flavor.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it so much, partly because it reminded me of David Lynch stuff.
It had a lot of that same feel to it.
Yeah, it was weird and a little out there, and it wasn't like on the surface it seems like real life, but then
it's clearly
just not. And
Yeah.
there's some kind of supernatural thing going on, but you're not real sure what it is. And but it includes a lot of humor and levity at the right moments, or even kind of intense moments where somebody just makes a comment that you're like, okay.
Yeah. Well, you definitely didn't get any closure at the end of that one.
Yeah,
so,
that's also true.
That's definitely David Lynch's.
Lynch-like?
Lynch-like, yeah. I was trying to say Lynchish. Yeah.
I think there is
Lynchian
a word
is probably,
that has made its way into the English language that's Lynchian. That's
that seems to be the one that fits.
Yeah. So it's disappointing that he died, but
yeah,
he was almost 80.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
80 as a smoker. I think that's. You can't ask for much better.
He lived a good life.
Yeah,
he lived a good life.
Can't ask for much better than that.
Yeah. Some things happen.
It's been since last we recorded.
Since last we recorded.
Yeah.
So I think the big news today, and I apologize that I haven't had the opportunity to really dig into this, but Trump announced yesterday that he and his team had managed to broker a ceasefire between the Israeli government and Gaza.
Yeah.
Now, Netanyahu pretty much immediately came out after that and said that there were still details to work out and it wasn't a finalized deal.
Yeah.
And then this morning, he suspended or delayed or whatever the Knesset vote on the ceasefire deal.
Oh, really? So there is some holes in this. It's not quite a done deal.
Yeah, it's not a done deal.
Okay.
As far as I know. Now, that may have changed since this morning. I worked today, so I didn't.
I didn't get any news updates saying that it wasn't.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I got some news updates last night and this morning that it was.
Yeah.
So
the last update I saw was 8:00 Eastern time, which is 7:00 our time.
Yeah.
This morning.
Yeah.
Saying that that Netanyahu had delayed the vote on the ceasefire in the Knesset.
Okay.
Claiming that this is really interesting after that first part where I said that he said not all the details had been worked out, and so they didn't have a done deal. Then he said that that Hamas had violated the terms of the deal.
That's not done yet.
Yeah, it's got to be one or the other, right? Like it can't be both of those things. So, I mean, we all know that he's fighting for his political life and keeping this war going is a big part of that.
I was fixing to say when I had heard the news, I was actually really surprised that that he had agreed to or was in the process of agreeing to something, because he doesn't, politically speaking, the end of this war does not bode well for him.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
So, I mean, there was, I don't know all the details because I don't follow all the ins and outs, but he was in major political trouble before this all started. I mean, to the point that the Israelis were in the streets.
Yeah.
So, like I said,
there were huge protests in Israel against Netanyahu before this war.
Exactly. So, Like I said, when I had heard the news, I was kind of surprised that he had was in the process to agreeing to something. But there's
Yeah.
something to be said about, like, Trump's the new incoming guy, and Trump has aligned himself closely with Israel and Netanyahu.
Yeah.
So, like, he's got leverage. If he wants to
Yeah.
shut this down, I mean, he's got the leverage to do it.
This is kind of a strange situation for him because he has aligned himself with Israel and Netanyahu, but he has also made it very clear that he wants the killing to stop.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like something he said during his campaign that, I don't know, it just kind of sticks out at me, that he was like something along the lines of, this has got to get wrapped up quick. Like, you need to go in, finish the job, and be done.
I think it's mostly because of legacy, though.
Well,
like, it's a black mark on the president that's overseeing this.
Well, I think now, and kind of in retrospect, that he was signaling to the Israelis that, like, when I get in office, your time's up.
Yeah.
that's what that was in that time. If I win this election, like, the clock's a ticking.
Yeah. I mean, he did make some comment about, I'm working closely with our Israeli allies to ensure that Gaza is never again becomes a harbor for terrorists or whatever,
Well, yeah.
So, and he hired a bunch of Zionists into his cabinet and the other positions. He's like, even Tulsi is on the, anyway, I'm not sure how this will actually work out for them, but it is a real black mark on whatever president is aligning themselves with a leader or a country that in many in the world's view is committing really barbaric acts.
Yeah.
And on that note, in the 24 hours roughly before the ceasefire was announced, or the ceasefire plan was announced, Israel stepped up its bombing of Gaza, like, to the nth degree.
Yeah, got to get it in while we can.
Exactly. Destroy as much as we can in the time we've got left.
Exactly.
So it is a 3-part plan. It'll never be followed through.
You're pretty confident.
I would be
of
surprised.
that one.
I would be really surprised if it was followed through in it. But it does start with a 40-something day ceasefire agreement.
Yeah. And letting some of the hostages go on
Yeah.
both sides, I would assume.
Yes. The idea is that the Hamas will release 30-something hostages. I'm sorry. I didn't get a chance to take any notes on this. This is all off the top of my head here. So it's 30-something Israeli hostages that Hamas is keeping, and the Israelis are supposed to release hundreds, maybe even thousands of Palestinian.
Well, I saw something, I don't know how solid it is, but that the Palestinians didn't even accurately know how many hostages they had left.
I wouldn't be surprised.
That they had put out, I swear they had put out some kind of statement, but I heard it somewhere yesterday that they were, and what they were saying was, since all of the attacks, that they just didn't have a firm grasp on who was left and who wasn't.
Yeah.
And that they were supposed to be going to, like, figure it out or whatever.
That's an interesting announcement, because it also says that Israeli hostages have died as a result of Israeli attacks.
That was very implicit in that announcement, is that that's what they were getting at, is like, y'all have killed a load of these guys, and we don't know who you have and who you hadn't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's an interesting foreign policy thing going on. I think that I don't know if I'm going to write it or if I'm just going to try and present it on the podcast, or maybe both. I think that I can make a strong case that Anthony Blinken is the worst Secretary of State in history.
Yeah.
I have always maintained that Foster Dulles was the worst Secretary of State in history. But I think that Blinken may have surpassed him.
Yeah. Have to really do a strong accounting and see what you come up with.
Yeah. So I got a note here I didn't use because Blinken gave kind of like an exit interview to the New York Times.
Yeah.
And so I have a note of a timestamp that I was going to pull as a clip, which I ended up not pulling as a clip because I thought it doesn't really fit with the flow of the podcast that I kind of have in mind right now.
Yeah.
But I think that I would like to take the time to listen to that entire interview because it's like an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes, and I haven't gotten to listen to it all.
Sounds brutal.
Yeah, because he lies over and over and over again. He's such a liar.
Yeah.
And so this particular clip was about how, that he really wanted to negotiate with the Russians before the war started.
Yeah.
And that they wouldn't negotiate, which is a complete and total fabrication. It's an absolute bald-faced lie.
Yeah.
The Russians were trying their best. They were sending communiques. They were trying to negotiate before the war began.
Yeah.
They were like, look, we've got some real serious security concerns, and we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
And they were ignored.
Yeah. I mean, I felt pretty confident at the time that them lining up and getting ready to go in Ukraine was all they really planned on doing.
Yeah.
Was that they were just wanting to prove a point that, we can do this if we need to, but that's not what they wanted to get some concessions.
They didn't even try to mobilize until, what was it? It was like 4-6 months into the war before they even started to mobilize.
Yeah. I mean, that was always kind of how I felt about how it all had played out. That
you can't convince anybody of that, though.
Oh.
Like anybody that gets their news from regular media, you can't convince anybody of that. They're like, oh, well, Putin's just a dictator. He's trying to take over all of Europe, and he's just starting with Ukraine. Oh my God.
Yeah. That position just ignores all of the
history.
Well, that's what I was fixing to say. The history, like that just completely throws out everything that's happened in the last 20 years. It's just insane. 20 plus, I should say.
Yeah, well, Blinken is, the Soviet Union fell in 91.
Yeah, so 30 years.
Well, it depends on who you ask. I don't know. There's you see a lot of dates about the fall of the Soviet Union, but roughly early 90s. Anyway.
I was going to say, yeah.
And Blinken is a hell of a propagandist, and that. From what I saw of that interview, that's all it is.
Yeah. He's just putting out a narrative.
Speaking of Russia, so on the way out, again, the Biden administration imposed a whole bunch of sanctions on Russian energy. This is gonna play out in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Because this is what I foresee. Now, obviously, all these sanctions on Russian energy are going to cause energy prices to rise.
Yeah.
There's no avoiding it.
Yeah.
It's going to cause energy prices to rise. Yeah. But he does this like 2 weeks before he leaves office.
Yeah.
And so when those energy prices rise, and he said, oh, well, the economy's in a good place, so we feel like we can get away with this now, which is what kind of...
Yeah.
I don't understand the logic there anyway. Like, oh, hey, our economy's finally recovered, so we're going to handicap it again. But here's the thing. Yeah. He handicaps it on the way out. So all of those energy price rises, all the impact that it's going to have on the economy, they're going to blame on Trump.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is just another losing hand, though, because all you've really done is you've imposed more issues on Russia. And then when Trump gets in, that's more bargaining chips he has to start pulling away.
Yeah.
And start using to be like, hey, we'll give you this back. We'll give you that back. Mm-hmm. Without him had pulled any of them. Yeah. He can literally go in and just start negotiating with giving back what Biden just took away.
I bet it depends on how it was done.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't know how.
I don't know.
I don't know exactly how those are imposed. I don't know how easy it is for the next president to just roll back the things that the leaving president just did in terms of those kind of foreign policy decisions.
You're right as far as it depends on what mechanisms he used to do it. And I don't know the specifics on any of that. It just feels like this is a really easy way for Trump to flip another win.
Yeah.
Which he's gotten really good at leading into his...
Well, at the very beginning of this year, the Ukrainians blocked the last Russian gas pipeline that was passing through Ukraine to the EU.
Yeah.
forfeiting roughly $40 million a year in rent that they collected off of that pipeline passing through.
Yeah.
And presumably expecting the EU to make up
To
the loss.
figure the difference, yeah.
And of course, it puts some EU countries into some energy crises. I mean, crises may be too strong a term.
But it's going to hurt their economies.
But it's going to hurt their economies, definitely. Yeah. And then, of course, after the Biden administration announced all these sanctions, like in the next couple of days, Ukraine launched multiple attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Yeah. Now, the Russians have been attacking Ukrainian infrastructure. I hear people out there saying that. Okay, yes, the Russians have been attacking Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Yeah. But in every case that the Russians attacked Ukrainian energy infrastructure, it was in response to an escalation by Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't start off attacking Ukrainian infrastructure.
Yeah.
But, then the Kerch Bridge attack happened, and they attacked Ukrainian infrastructure. And then attacks into Russia happened, and they started attacking more infrastructure. Like, it has always been if you're going to escalate, let me show you what we can do.
We can escalate too.
Yeah. And in the end, Russia has escalation dominance in this war.
Yeah. I mean, they're the dominant military.
In the attrition loss, Russia has the
they just have the bodies.
Yeah, they have the advantage in an attrition war. They just have more people. They have a bigger economy. They have more of their own infrastructure and resources. And then in an escalation war, they have escalation dominance also.
Yeah,
like, this is a lost war.
Yeah,
it's a lost war for Ukraine. There's nothing they should have cut their losses in March, April of 2022, right after it happened. They could have had a good deal.
Yeah,
they could have had a good deal where all they gave up was Crimea, that was never really under their control, and the Donbass regions that they didn't really have under control. They were spending tons of money trying to keep in line.
Yeah,
they could have just let it go.
Yeah.
And it could have been over.
Yeah, and had all of their infrastructure still more or less intact.
Yeah, and the deal was on the table, and it was the West that stepped in.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson went over there and talked to Zelensky, and immediately afterwards they withdrew from the essentially settled agreement.
Yeah, yeah. We got to have our proxy war, man. Just got to have it.
It's unbelievable how we've manipulated this in such a bad way for both ourselves and especially for the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to. And that's the really sad part.
Yeah.
Is that we just can't let it go. Because it's a blemish on our record. I think of did you ever see the movie Stripes with Bill Murray? Harold Ramis and Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's such a good movie. It's so funny. I mean, it has the problem that many comedies do, where like the last 20 minutes or so, they should have just
they're trying to wrap everything up.
Yeah, and it becomes not a comedy anymore. And oh well.
Yeah.
But there's a part in it where Bill Murray gives this speech about the power of the American military and so on. And how like great they are, and he ends it with like, "We're 10-1." The one presumably being Vietnam.
Vietnam, yeah.
Let's tally it up now.
Oh yeah, you don't want to count that up. Yeah, that's I bet it's below 500.
No, we haven't lost 10 wars.
You don't think so?
No.
Depends on what you define as a war.
It depends on what you define as a win and a loss too. But the record is not looking good in the last
couple of decades.
Yeah. Since we launched the terror war, since we launched this like kind of amorphous war against we're not sure exactly what, just kind of whoever we claim. I mean, like once again, we're talking about a media that's going crazy about the New Orleans attack and this guy who aligns himself with ISIS and our big war against ISIS and how terrible it is that ISIS is attacking America, while at the same time we're funding and supporting an ISIS leader in his takeover of Syria.
Yeah. Like it doesn't. Well, and I'll go back to it. I mean, it's because we have such a horrible media in this country. I mean, people just don't know these things. It's just not common knowledge.
Yeah. We had a county Libertarian Party meeting last night. Yeah. And we were talking about, like, how do we get people on our side? I should have brought up our last podcast where we were talking about what the National Party could do, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think about it because we were talking about locally. And I was actually arguing against exactly, like, dealing with the same issues that I was saying that the National Party should deal with. I was saying that the local party
shouldn't. Yeah.
Because I think that, like, if you want to draw people in on the local level, you need to deal with local issues. Yeah. I think that the vast majority of people don't care about foreign policy. I mean, they care about monetary policy in the sense that it hits them at home.
Yeah.
But, like, if you just start talking about monetary policy, they don't care.
Yeah.
Even, like, the surveillance state stuff and so forth. Like, that's a non-issue to them.
Yeah.
You want issues that are being fought about in your local governments, in your county government, in your city councils, etc. Yeah. Those are the ways that you draw people in locally, I think.
Yeah.
And especially in a place like this, I don't like where we live in rural Alabama.
Yeah.
Most people just aren't concerned with the kind of, like, large scale things that we probably spend most of our time talking about on this podcast. Yeah. I don't think it's effective. We did start with some program or whatever that the state chair was calling Mycroft, and our secretary said, "You keep saying this. I don't understand what you're saying. I keep hearing Minecraft."
Yeah.
And I said Mycroft, like Mycroft Holmes. And the state chair, like, shook his head. And I said, "Has somebody been reading The Moon is a Harsh Mistress recently?" And he, like, sheepishly raised his hand.
Yeah. Like, I know that reference.
Ha! I bet you didn't expect to get called out on that. But I've been reading that book, so
yeah. So you can sympathize.
Yeah, any libertarian fan of science fiction should read Robert Heinlein's "The Moon is a Harsh Mistress." You'll enjoy it, I promise.
Yeah.
God, I got way off track. What were we talking about?
War in Russia and Ukraine.
No, I think I'd transitioned a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, I sidetracked myself.
It was a fun little diversion.
Yeah. Something about like dealing with issues. I don't know. Oh, well.
Oh, yeah, because I was talking about the media doesn't cover. Like, people just don't know that we're funding ISIS in Syria. Like, they don't. Yeah. It's just because the media is not going to cover that because they're paid not to.
And this may or may not have been my point, but like, I guess what I was getting at there is that, like, most people just don't care.
No, I mean, because I think that is where you were going. Because people are more focused on what's going on in our neighborhood or our neck of the woods. You know?
Yeah.
I think the only exception to that, the real exception to that, is people that are either in the military or have children in the military or something like that. Mm-hmm. I know from my own personal experience, like, those are the people that seem to be in tune with, like, what's going on across the world.
Yeah.
It's the people that have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Where they've got a loved one over there.
Mm-hmm. So no, that makes sense. Speaking of local issues, maybe we should shift to a local issue, but not our local issue.
All right.
Which is the fires. I don't know how we get through this episode without talking about the fires in California.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say, like, it's astonishing to me to see a failure on every level.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it truly, I mean, and so when I talk to people about this here locally, the big thing I hear is, and they're not wrong, but it's like, well, it's California. What do you expect? And I mean, they're right. Like I mean, I agree. We all know that California is
I really
backwards.
don't like that attitude, though.
I don't.
This is the people that live there. You can't hold them responsible for the people that they voted in and so forth. I mean, I understand the idea that this is what they got, they deserve it, because this is what they've selected and this is what they've.
I don't know that the people I talk to necessarily feel that way, and they don't.
Okay, good, because I wanted to avoid like any kind of partisan thing about this.
Well, yeah.
Because it's like this is a terrible event for a lot of people.
Absolutely,
and a lot of people that just don't. I mean, they're just trying to live their lives,
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine trying to recover from this. The celebrities, it sucks for them too, but they'll be okay.
But they can, they got a home somewhere else they can go live in.
But like people that live in like Altadena, which is a working class neighborhood, that have lost everything, I don't know how they recover.
No, because most of them don't have insurance.
Yeah, well, that's an additional problem.
Well, that's what I get at is it's just a failure on every level from the not having waters in the hydrants to just from every level. Like this is just, I can't imagine a whole lot much worse of a situation.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that this is just part of the ecology out there.
It is. Like
fires are just part of the ecology. And there was a time where they managed it by controlled burns and cutting away areas to create fire breaks, and so forth. And they don't do that anymore. They decided to, I don't know, like militarize their fire department. Oh, let's buy more fancy equipment and do all this thing. And they haven't been managing, okay, California's been burning since before humans lived there.
Yeah.
And then the humans that lived there did controlled burns, like the indigenous tribes that lived in California before Europeans made it over there to dig up gold.
Yeah.
They did controlled burns.
Yeah, because they didn't want it burning where they live.
Right. I mean, burns are going to happen, so you need to do it in a controlled way.
Yeah. I mean, we do that here locally. We don't have that kind of problem, but
well, it's because our humidity is too high. Like,
but I've drove and seen controlled burns here all the time. There'd be people on Facebook complaining, "Why is it so smoky?" Oh, they're burning Loxley again. Like,
well, it requires like a 15% or less humidity for a cigarette butt to ignite a fire.
Oh, yeah.
And we're never under that number here.
It's not done for those type of reasons.
I know.
Think.
I'm just,
but we do it though.
It's just an interesting factoid, I thought.
Yeah.
Because I remember that coming up when I was in Arizona. Like, you
really?
Can't just like throw your cigarette butts because
you gotta be
it
careful.
Is frequently 15% or less humidity. And that can ignite a fire.
Yeah.
But they've been just like accumulating tinder or kindling for all this time.
Decades.
And they're not managing their water infrastructure well. Okay. So in 2014, the state of California, the citizens of California had a vote where they voted $7.5 billion, billion with a B, to build water infrastructure by 2022.
Oh, wow. So that's good news for them. So this shouldn't have been a problem at all.
You know how much has been built?
None, I would imagine.
None. Yeah. Absolutely zero. Nothing has been built. They have not added additional reservoirs for 50 years.
That is wild.
And in that time, the population has gone up by 150%. They've gone from like 20-something million to almost 40 million.
Wow. Yeah, with no addition. And they allocated the funds to do it.
Yeah, the people wanted it.
Yeah.
And instead what they're actually doing is taking away water infrastructure because, climate change. And that's the other thing too.
Wasn't it California that had the thing where you couldn't like collect rainwater or something? Didn't they have? Wasn't that? Was that them?
Yeah, there was something like that. Yeah. They have a whole bunch of restrictions on water use, while at the same time they're just diverting water out into the Pacific Ocean. And I'm tired of politicians. I heard somebody say something like, politicians use climate change in the same way that as my dog ate my homework.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it just becomes this diversion from mismanagement.
Yeah.
And
and that's something, speaking of climate change just in general, like if the climate really is changing, and I don't think that there's much of an argument that it's not, like that's the solution, is to come up with ways to mitigate and move people around, and like that's the type of thing you want to do, not change the climate.
Yeah.
Like, how is that the solution?
No, and it can't be done. And that's something that probably should be pointed out too. Like they couldn't have prevented these fires.
No.
Like fires are going to happen. They can't have prevented it, but they definitely could have mitigated the damage and the size and the scope of the fires.
Absolutely.
With proper management. But the climate change thing drives me crazy. Like California has a dry, these are all known things.
Yeah.
All right. California has a dry climate.
Yeah.
They have cyclical rainfall, and desert winds. This is the thing right now, right?
All
like
a recipe. Yeah.
Oh, it's the Santa Ana winds. They're 100 miles an hour. Yeah, okay, that's true, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
But it's not an unexpected problem.
Right?
It's not a new problem.
You couldn't plan for that, right?
This is all things that California should be aware of, that like this is just a part of their ecology.
Yeah.
And they've had 2 years of record rainfall.
Yeah. So
before this.
Yeah.
I don't know. So the insurance thing is interesting too. You know what? Before we move on, I want to talk about climate change a little more.
Sure.
All right. I have a clip, actually.
Okay.
Let's play a clip.
All right.
I got a clip about historical climate. This is dang, I can't think of her name right now. Tori
Have it on the other side of the clip.
Harrisburg, Tori something or other. She's a paleobiologist.
Okay.
But paleobiology, she's repeating some information that has been fairly well understood by ice cores and so forth, like ground cores.
Yeah.
They use the ground cores to determine like what spores and so forth are in particular time periods, and then they use those based on their, like the plants that belong to those. Yeah. Pollen also, like spores and pollen. The plants that belong to those, what their temperature ranges are to estimate with a fair degree of certainty the climate in particular areas where the cores were taken from a long time ago.
Yeah.
But she's talking about our current situation right now, and I'll have her last name after the clip.
All right.
All right, here we go.
So we talk about the Ice Age as a general term. It's not a very scientific term, but really that just refers to a period of the time when there's permanent ice at the poles, like today. So we're still in an Ice Age. We're just in a warm stage within this Ice Age of the last 2.5 million years. And for the last 800,000 years or so, we have been governed by a roughly 100,000 year cycle between cold stages and warm stages like today. And that's entirely dependent, well, not entirely, but it's mostly driven by these great big orbital cycles of the way the Earth moves around the sun and the way the Earth tilts on its axis and the way the Earth wobbles around that axis. And they come together in these rhythms to create this 100,000 year cycle from cold to warm, from cold to warm. And so when we think of the Neanderthals as being an Ice Age animal, or woolly mammoths as being an Ice Age mammal, it's not the full picture. We're actually talking about a time of changing climates, of climates that went from very, very cold, where the ice could stretch all the way down, say, to the north of London in Europe. You know, so it got to Finchley Road 450,000 years ago. And then you've got periods of warm, as Becky says, where it could actually be warmer than today. So the last interglacial, the last warm stage 125,000 years ago, was maybe up to 4 degrees warmer than today. And hippos in Yorkshire, hippos in the Thames, lions in the Thames. You know, these differences are extraordinary.
Hippos in the Thames. Remember, she's British, by the way, so when she says up to 4 degrees warmer than it is today, she means Celsius.
Yeah, all right.
Like, this whole thing is just so absurd, and she catches herself because she knows she can't say it entirely, that these cycles are ruled by orbital cycles.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, wait a minute, I can't say that it's entirely, well, mostly. But still, mostly.
Yeah.
And here's something that I want everybody to understand about like the way they talk about climate change. And you get it's the hottest year on record, year after year after year,
Yeah.
hottest year on record. The record only extends back, like they haven't been doing consistent temperature checks except since like the mid 19th century, so roughly 1850.
Yeah.
We'll say 1850. And you may have heard of the Little Ice Age. Like there was a period of like intense cold throughout the world that's called the Little Ice Age that ran from roughly the 14th century till the middle of the 19th century.
Yeah.
Roughly 1850. And also, they decided that the Industrial Revolution began in the middle of the 19th century, 1850. Yeah. So let's review. You have a cold period called the Little Ice Age that ends in 1850. You have regular temperature records going back to 1850. You have the Industrial Revolution beginning in 1850. And that's when global warming started, after the Industrial Revolution.
So clearly all of those factories had an impact.
Yes. So you have a warming period after an extremely cold period.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Like you have one of a colder period of a cycle, and it became warmer after that. Now also, that these records only go back to roughly 1850, which means that they're saying that temperatures have been warming during the Industrial Revolution, but they don't have good temperature records from before the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. So they have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
There's nothing to compare it to. So yeah, it's been getting warmer since the Little Ice Age.
Yeah.
But they don't know what average temperatures were before that. They don't even know what average temperatures were during the Little Ice Age. They just know how long the cold periods lasted and so forth. Like it's, they're good narrative records of it being colder.
Yeah, but they don't have year by year statistics.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing, I'm not going to say it's made up, because climate does change and it's getting warmer.
Yeah.
But this could easily just be part of the cycle. There's no evidence that it's something that we're doing.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about carbon pollution, if there's any kind of pollution like gas pollution in this world as a result of life on it, it's oxygen.
Yeah, all right.
Like go look up your photosynthesis cycle. Like before life existed on this planet, there wasn't oxygen in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like oxygen is a result of life converting carbon dioxide through photosynthesis into sugar and oxygen.
Yeah.
Like before life, there was no oxygen. And oxygen is a really volatile chemical, which is why it's effective as an energy source. But it also is the reason that iron rusts and that your cells eventually fall apart. You talk about antioxidants to protect your cells.
Yeah.
That's because over time, oxygen actually destroys you too. It's a corrosive agent.
Yeah.
So if there's any pollution in this world, it's oxygen.
Yeah.
Like the idea that carbon dioxide is a pollutant is just, it's asinine.
Wow. It just seems like all this energy is focused on trying to change the climate when it should be trying to live with the climate as it is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who decided that 150 years ago was the perfect Earth temperature and that we can't deviate from that.
Right. Climate by definition changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the opposite of climate change? I don't think we want that.
You know, it's like, it's the same as saying that the continents are in their perfect position right now, and we've got to stop continental drift.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's a good analogy, actually. I like that.
It's ridiculous. But there have been some real failures here on the part of the governments. The failures to take action to control potential fires and mitigate the overall damage have resulted in the losses from fire being so high. I mean, like there was the Camp Fire. What was that?
It's a couple of years ago.
2018, maybe something
was it that
like
far
that.
Back? Maybe
2019, 2020. I don't know.
It
was before COVID, I think.
I think so. Yeah, I guess you're right.
So, I mean, and it's not to say that there aren't other problems too. Like, so P&G was implicated in that fire, which is, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's, I didn't look up her name while I was back there. It's like Harrisburg or something. Anyway, Tori something, paleobiologist. There can't be that many.
Right.
Now I feel bad about not giving her credit, but whatever. So P&G was implicated in that fire. They had bad infrastructure in the electric lines that started the fire. 80-something people died, I think.
Yeah.
They were sued and held liable for something like $13 billion, maybe something like that.
Wow.
It was a lot of money anyway, and they couldn't pay it, even though they're essentially a government-granted monopoly in Northern California for electrical service.
Yeah.
They couldn't pay it. They declared bankruptcy. They're still operating.
That was it. End of story.
Yeah. The government still gets and they spend millions of dollars on lobbying in California government.
Yeah. That's money well spent from the sounds of things.
Yeah, obviously. So there are other problems. In the end, it really does come back to government a lot. I don't know that it matters whether it's a Democrat or Republican government.
Well,
but
that's the point I was going to make. The Democrats are losing a lot right now. It's kind of astonishing that every corner they just seem to be losing. But as far as this particular disaster is concerned, this can happen on either side of the political aisle.
Oh, yeah. I think so, too.
And it goes back to something we talk about a lot here. I mean, California has one of the biggest, it's the biggest government in the country other than the federal government, I'm assuming. I'm making an assumption there, I guess. But, they're the biggest government around. And for them to fail this hard just goes to show that the bigger the government, the harder it fails.
Yeah.
That's my sense of things.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair assessment, I think. There's also land use restrictions, grazing restrictions. Grazing, like cattle grazing, could have had a real impact on how far this fire went.
Yeah.
Because they chew up a lot of that kindling.
Well, you're talking about a state that tries to micromanage every aspect of everything. And it just goes to show you can't do that. Like, there's not a way to... I don't know. It just doesn't work.
But, talking about the insurance premiums, like because of these failures to manage the situation, there have been huge, huge losses in fires.
Yeah.
And I know a bunch of insurance companies requested to raise premiums as a result of the losses.
Yeah.
Because they can't sustain this kind of loss.
Yeah.
A broke insurance company doesn't pay out any claims.
Well, that's kind of the point I was going to make is you force these companies into the situation, and then a disaster like this happens. Like, even the companies that are operating over there could easily go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Like, a catastrophe like this will just bankrupt the company.
It happens with hurricanes here from time to time.
It does.
Like,
we've dealt with that.
Yeah, we have insurance companies go bankrupt because they can't handle their hurricane losses.
Yeah.
And so the state of California said, no, you can't raise your premiums. They set price controls on insurance costs.
Yeah.
And so the result of that was that a whole bunch of insurance companies just left.
Yeah.
Or didn't renew policies.
Yeah. There was a lot of that. A lot of these people are in really bad situations that, ultimately, I think what will end up happening is the federal government...
That will all pay for it.
Yeah, is going to step in. And honestly, as much as I wouldn't advocate for this. You got to do something for these folks.
Yeah. Well, no, I just advocate for private charity.
Yeah, I get it.
Like, and they're not. Where are they with? There's still people living in tents in North Carolina.
Yes, there is. There is. It's. I don't know. It's just horrible. Like, it's horrible all the way around.
Yeah.
I don't know what the status is of the people in North Carolina, but that's still like those folks are still hurting up there too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just goes back to we got to fix this climate, man.
Right. Thanks.
Can you imagine advocating for that?
Made my point for me.
Yeah, like
please tell me you can hear the sarcasm in my voice.
It's just it's so absurd to me that you could argue that like that all of these people are suffering. If we only fixed the climate, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Like, are you serious? Like, I don't know.
It really is a shame. I'm sorry that it's happened out there. I don't know how. There's a lot of people that'll never recover from this.
Yeah.
And that really sucks. I don't know what else to say about it. I wish I could say more. I'm tired of governments using climate change as a scapegoat for their own bad management. I wish people had a better understanding of science generally. That's something that I have mentioned over and over on this podcast over the course of however many years. Yeah. There's information out there, like there's nothing new under the sun. That's really what it comes down to in the end.
Yeah.
Like the Earth has progressed in the way the Earth has progressed in the entire history of the Earth.
Yeah, right.
Things change. There's nothing static here.
Yeah. And you wouldn't want it to be.
No. But it's terrible for those people. It's unfortunate that they had such poor management. And part of it is just like weird aesthetic things. So they want to prevent fires.
Yeah. And
promote forest growth. Which goes against their own thing, by the way, because they want to, they want to create carbon sinks because of the carbon pollution. Carbon is the building block of life. Carbon pollution. Anyway, they want to create these carbon sinks, and actually grasslands are way better at that than trees are. But they're trying to prevent these fires, and trees look nice, and, I saw a picture of, I can't remember what valley it is near LA. I saw a picture from 150 years ago and today. Well, not today, but, but a couple of years ago of this valley. And the significant and noticeable difference was the amount of tree cover.
Really?
In the old picture from 150 years ago, it was mostly grasslands. There were copses, like there were groups of trees here and there.
Patches, yeah.
And not a small number of them, but you could mostly see the valley floor.
Yeah.
Well, you could see the grass on the valley floor.
Yeah.
And the picture from more recently, the contemporary picture, it was all trees. You couldn't see any grass. You couldn't see the valley floor. It was all trees.
Yeah.
And the reason that it had been like that before is because these regular fires burn off the trees. Like that's part of the renewal it's just part of the ecology.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they shouldn't live there any more than I think that people shouldn't live on the Gulf Coast because there's hurricanes or whatever. Like that's not the point.
It's just the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
It's in anywhere you pick, there's going to be a thing. So I mean, it's just
I don't know where the safe from natural disasters area is. I haven't figured it out. I've looked.
Right. You considering.
I've looked. I mean, I don't know that I could do California because earthquakes just like terrify me.
Yeah.
Like the idea of the ground underneath me not being stable seems like really weird. I don't drink enough to think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, right.
But, I just don't know. I'm tired of the scapegoating.
Yeah. Well, it
at
really
least take
is.
Responsibility for it. And,
but the government, they're not capable of taking responsibility because of the perverse incentives and they fail up.
Yeah. What is the mayor of LA that was in Ghana? Is that right?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Bass is her last name. She was in Ghana for the presidential inauguration there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she's boycotting the presidential inauguration in this country.
She's not going. I did hear that. Yep.
But anyway, I said I didn't want to make it a political or a partisan thing. But it is like government is part of the responsibility. And I think that without government, people would manage it way better.
Oh, 100%.
Like communities could manage this far better than government can.
Absolutely. Because communities don't want to see this happen.
Right.
And I just feel like big government is a little more indifferent on the matter.
Yeah, well, indifferent probably. I don't think they want to see it happen.
I don't think they want to see it happen.
I don't think that they're upset about the dependence that it creates, though.
Exactly. So,
did you see that video of the that woman coming up and confronting Gavin Newsom about like, what are you doing about this?
I heard the audio from it.
Oh man. That was a trip. That was a great video. People have to go look that one up. That was so good. And he's just like lying to her through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm on the phone with the president right now. I want to hear because I don't believe you.
Yeah.
That was such a great response from her. He's like, well, I can't get through.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Well, then you're not on the phone with the president right now.
Yeah.
And his only answer is like, I'm getting us the funding from the federal government, exactly like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just gonna get the money from every other taxpayer in this country.
Yeah.
Well, actually, including you, who have lost something.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. I did want to talk really briefly before we close out. We've only got a couple of minutes about the Facebook thing again. I think we mentioned it a little briefly the last time.
We may have. I don't remember. Now.
This one I am going to turn into a partisan issue.
Yeah, well, there's not really a whole lot of ways not to.
So
it's pretty clear what happened here.
You and I had a little discussion before we got started about like what to think of Zuckerberg with his sudden turnaround to I believe in free speech platform for Facebook, and we're going to not moderate in the same way, and we're switching to community notes like X and all that stuff.
Yeah. All things I'm happy to hear, by the way.
Yeah.
Not going to take away from that.
Yeah. I guess our disagreement was that you were like really intent on holding him accountable for the way he's been however long.
I'm just saying, like, I'm not going to just forgive the guy. Like, I'm not going to forget what he did.
Well,
like,
I'm not on board with forgiving and forgetting either. Well, forgiving maybe. I mean, I think they're extenuating circumstances.
You got to apologize before you get forgiveness.
I don't think that an apology is totally necessary, and I think apology probably does more damage than good anyway in the end. Like, it'll make us feel better, but he's got a business to run. It damages the brand.
He damaged the brand enough with what he did.
Well,
I'm
but what
surprised Facebook survived that.
I think it's a reasonable argument to make that he was trying to protect the brand against the government.
That's fair, but he needs to come out and make that argument because I ain't heard him make it.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to hear him like start
and
saying.
If that's the case, name some names. Who in the government did what?
I would like to hear him start talking about how the government was pressuring
absolutely
Facebook. I think that's
something like that would
request.
give me a little more. I'd feel a little better about the situation. Yeah. But we're not going to get that from him. He's a weak guy. I mean, it's just what it is. And you can make the argument he was trying to protect his business, and I actually am sympathetic to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that that's what he was doing. But at some point, you've got to make the. I'm surprised that Facebook survived it just because when they started doing the bans and stuff like that and taking down content, I thought people would just leave the platform. And I think a lot of people did. Like, I think they lost a lot of users over that. But it didn't swallow up the platform, and I'm surprised by that.
There's just too many connections.
You're right. I mean, I guess that's at the end of the day.
There's too many connections. There's too many people using it. There's not enough people using any other platform, and there's too many other options to move to.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have like an organized movement to some other specific platform.
Well, there was people that were trying, but none of it ever worked. It never went anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But the whole idea that you're going to start censoring and banning your users on a social media platform just sounds like a recipe for disaster. Like, as far as bankrupting the company. But
I mean, they publicly brought him out in front and said that
shook him down.
Yeah,
I mean, they did.
We talked about that on the podcast at the time.
We did.
So this is all true. I don't trust him in the long run. I think that he's just following whatever political winds he feels.
The wind's blowing really hard in one direction right now.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I found interesting. This was the statement that he made in his announcement that really stood out to me. I'm going to play this clip.
Okay.
The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Yeah, so I just find it interesting that suddenly the election of a Republican president is the sign that the political winds are shifting towards free speech.
Yeah. Well, it's because the past decade or from whenever Trump came onto the scene, the Democrats have been shutting down speech like pretty openly.
Yeah.
And like I say, I mean, traditionally prior to Trump, that wasn't really their shtick. Like they were free, they were the party of free speech.
Yeah.
But all of that shifted, and it's funny how that works because, like, so the Democrats decided they had to shut down Trump and his supporters, so they became the censorship party, and then the Republicans, when their speech is the one being shut down,
Yeah.
they all of a sudden those roles switch pretty quick.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's wow, that was really loud. Sorry, everybody.
Screaming into the mic.
Yeah, it's just an interesting shift. It's unfortunate that there's any side that is opposed to free speech. Like the idea that there would be a political shift to free speech in this country is.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
there's a problem just right there.
Yeah, it can't be forgotten what all was done through Facebook and these social media platforms to the American people during COVID. I mean, it started whenever Trump took office, but it like hit a fever pitch. Like it was at its peak during COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't, if you were anywhere outside the narrative, like you just couldn't speak on these platforms.
Yeah. Well, we still have videos that we can't get back up on YouTube.
I mean, it's and I like I say, I'm glad he's made the switch. I'm glad that he's on the right team now. I hope he stays there, but I ain't taking my eyes off this guy. Like,
yeah. I don't trust that it won't shift again in the future, but I don't want to attack him about this.
Yeah.
Like, welcome to the party, man. Come on in.
Yeah. I hope you stay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's more my feelings. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, something about Moon is a harsh mistress, right?
Yeah.
Come back around to that. Because I thought it was the beginning, but it was actually in the middle of somewhere that we talked about that. But anybody who is a libertarian like sci-fi should definitely read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. But there's oh, okay. So, yeah.
You want to talk about
Heinlein.
Yeah.
So I was watching one of these booktuber things, and they were doing like their top 10 science fiction books of all time. And in number 10 was Starship Troopers. And he's like, I know what people are going to say, but I've always been able to separate the art from the artist. And I was like, what?
What did he do?
What's the controversy with Heinlein?
Yeah.
And so I went and looked it up. And it turns out that the controversy with Heinlein is that his political beliefs often bled over into his fiction, particularly his libertarian tendencies and his belief in a meritocracy.
Yes.
And so my first question was, when did meritocracy become a bad word?
Yeah.
It's like, what's the alternative that you would prefer
Right.
to a meritocracy? I'm very confused about this. Like, we don't want nepotism, right? Like, that's, I don't know. I'm just, if anybody can explain to me why meritocracy is a bad word, then like, please let me know. And I've heard it beyond that. So it's not just this thing, but I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Why you wouldn't want, talented, competent people to rise to the top.
Yeah.
I'm lost on that. But then they're saying his libertarian tendencies and his belief in a meritocracy, and then his promotion of militarism and authoritarianism.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, do you have any idea what libertarian means?
Yeah, that all those things don't belong together. Something's off here.
And they said particularly in Starship Troopers.
Ah. You
this
don't understand what satire is.
Yeah. Again, satire is dead. Yeah. Again, I was confused, and I thought, yeah, you guys realize that that's a satire, right? Like the whole point is pointing out the fallacy of this kind of cultural setup,
Right.
And I guess, at least from what I've read, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is probably the most political of his books. Yeah. Starship Troopers is kind of political, but it's more of a cultural commentary.
Yeah.
This one is very much a political commentary. It's talking about a revolution, and so on. And there's a character who lays out, like, in a very simple way, what kind of the core of libertarian political philosophy is. Not libertarian philosophy as a whole, but libertarian philosophy of government.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the kind of government that they want. And he says, the question to be answered is, in what case is it moral for a group of people to do something that it is immoral for any individual within the group to do?
Yeah.
And the person he's talking to says, that's not relevant to this discussion here. And he says, no, that's the only question that's relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
And it really so succinctly describes, like, what sets libertarians apart is that idea that there's never a scenario where it is moral for a group of people to do something that it is immoral for any individual within the group to do, and that is essentially the fallacy of government in the first place.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really interesting. And then there's a long bit where he's talking about his particular, like, Randian anarchist belief, which is really interesting too. But I kept coming back to that question. I was like, man, that is the question. He's right. Yeah. That's the most important question. Yeah. And that's why the libertarian philosophy is so important, is because we are the only group of people out there that's saying, yeah, there's nothing that a government can do morally that it wouldn't be moral for an individual to do. And so if government kills, if government kidnaps, if government thieves, it's not moral just because it's the government that did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can't do it, then they can't do it.
Yeah.
Morally.
Morally. Yeah, exactly.
Just because they have the monopoly on force, violence, or use of force or coercion or whatever doesn't make it right.
Exactly.
Like, there's this kind of weird thing that people, poo-poo the idea that might makes right. That, I think people, at least in free places, generally understand that there's something morally repulsive about that idea. Yeah. But then they accept it when they're talking about their own government.
Right.
I guess that didn't really lead anywhere. I don't know. But it's as good a place to close as any, I suppose.
It's a good place to close it out.
So we expect to be back next week.
If we're not snowed in.
We're not going to be snowed in.
Any snow in Alabama is snowed in as far as I'm concerned.
Well, not in all of Alabama.
Or in lower Alabama, where I reside.
Yeah. I lived in a place with ice storms. This is not a really big deal.
It is down here.
Although I will take any excuse to work from home. Wow. That's not really true. I got really tired of working from home during COVID.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
I like it being separate places.
Yeah, separate business from pleasure.
I'm working from home tomorrow.
Yeah.
But not all the time.
Yeah.
I don't like it being an all the time thing.
Yeah.
But no, it's not going to be so bad that we can't record. I'm sure.
We'll
I'm
see.
confident.
You confident? You weatherman now?
Weatherman
Mike?
My mom did call me today and said, before this weekend, or not this weekend, before the end of this weekend, you need to go out and buy me some of those styrofoam covers for outside faucets.
Oh, yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm worried about. You can just wrap a towel; it'll be fine.
That's what I've always done.
Yeah. If it comes to it, I'll just get duct tape and a bunch of towels.
I've done it many a time.
It'll be all right. But I will go and try and find some of those.
It's way easier if you got the cover. But
Yeah.
those have been a commodity to pass. Because, I mean, this isn't the first hard freeze we've had. It's going to be the hardest one we've had.
Yeah.
But we've had one pretty decent freeze already.
Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe they have restocked.
They may have. It's very possible.
I hope.
I wouldn't count on that. But
I'll
it's
take some
possible.
time. I'll go early in the morning tomorrow to like Lowe's and Home Depot and see if I can find them.
You may get lucky. They may have buckets of them.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll drag Liberty Larry over here no matter what the weather is next week.
Yeah.
As long as the power's on.
Well, there's that. I don't know. This is going to be on the other side of Trump being elected
I know.
or taking office. You know, the grid may go down.
There could be a coup.
There's a lot of people that believe the grid may go down before he takes office.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. But barring any some totally bizarre scenario, we'll be back next week.
All right.
In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean. Like and share, comment, subscribe. You can always email me, michael@thelibertymike.com. If you have something to say about my position on global warming, feel free. I'm ready to read whatever you have.
And refute it.
Probably.
Attempt to refute it.
Yeah. I'm happy to I'm happy to confront alternative views.
Yeah. And you've been good about switching when you've been convinced or when the convincing argument has been made.
Yeah. Yeah. So. I have an open mind,
Yeah.
in a real sense. I'm just very confident in what I believe.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out of nothing.
Yeah. Right.
So
scientific process has always been put forth.
Yeah. I really try and stick to that. If the evidence puts me in a different view, then so be it.
Yeah.
But it needs evidence.
Yeah.
I really want data.
Yeah.
Good data. There's bad data too.
Yeah.
Good data. Anyway, so yeah, we'll be back next week when we finally get this right. And in the meantime, try to stay free.
Life short, live free.
Ciao.
Later.